Who's screwed? Internet users. Well, maybe. The FCC voted on and passed a net neutrality proposal today put forth by the chairman, Julius Genachowski. The only problem is consumer advocates are saying that instead of protecting a free and open internet, this FCC proposal does the exact opposite, giving authority to ISPs, internet service providers, to begin carving up the internet and setting preferences for the type of content they want to carry. The first sign of weakness in the proposal should be that it has the full support of major service providers like AT&T and Verizon. So did we all just get handed a bad deal by the FCC? And is net neutrality now officially dead? And if so, why are conservatives and opponents of net neutrality angry with the FCC's proposal as well? Here to break down the issue is Craig Aaron, managing director of freepress.net. And on the side of the giant corporations policing themselves, Seton Motley. Well, that's your position.
Corporate tool.
President of lessgovernment.org. Well, if you got less government, you got more corporate power.
Yes.
Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Tom.
And in fact, well, we've had that debate many times. Craig, from your point of view, what happened today?
Well, I think what happened is that the FCC really squandered an opportunity. They had a chance to pass clear rules of the road for the internet that would have encouraged innovation, that would have protected internet users, that would have created and continued the vibrant internet that we have. It's become an unrivaled environment for democratic participation, for free speech, and for economic innovation. And instead, the FCC, despite the promises of the president, despite the pledges of the FCC chairman, delivered really a half measure, partial rules that simply aren't good enough, won't protect internet users, and will give away way too much to the AT&Ts and Comcasts and Verizons of the world.
And Seton, from your point of view, what happened?
Well, first of all, Verizon is vociferously opposed to this. They did not sign on, as you said in the intro. AT&T is begrudgingly, at the barrel of a gun, signed on with the threat of a Title II reclassification as the only other alternative. Said, you get Title II or you'll take this Title I.
That's who's holding the gun.
Yeah,
so.
I was going to say, this may be like that moment in Blazing Saddles.
That would be
Cleavon Little goes,
that would be FCC Chairman Julius Caesar. And so the pro net neutrality people are living in a parallel universe. In the last 8 to 10 years, we've been told again and again and again and again and again, we need net neutrality now, we need net neutrality now. The corporate interests are just going to swallow up the internet and dominate it. And in the last 10 years, we've had more advancement and more growth in the internet sphere than we have in any other sphere in the history of the planet ever.
But during that same period of time, these last 10 years, what we've seen is the internet go from thousands and thousands of small ISPs to hundreds of medium-sized ISPs to now you got one company, Comcast, that has about half the country, if my understanding is correct.
And are they doing any of the things that all the net neutrality proponents are accusing them of?
Let's
well,
an expert here.
Look,
Craig,
Comcast has
Aaron,
already been caught interfering with lawful file sharing. So they got caught. That created some of the mess that we're in right now.
And what happened when they sued?
Well, they sued, and because
what happened?
Right, and the courts ruled that the FCC
doesn't have the authority
because the Bush administration had changed the way that broadband had been regulated. Now, I think this FCC has made mistakes. I think they had the opportunity to set right the mistakes of the past, and instead they kind of chose this mushy middle ground where they're really getting nothing done and making nobody happy. But if you want to, I'm all for the advances of the internet. I think the internet's an amazing thing. I want to continue that. We've had net neutrality or a de facto net neutrality regime. That's what's encouraged all of these innovations. That's why a couple guys in a garage could start Google. That's why some Israeli college students could invent instant messaging, because all that innovation was at the edges. That's because of net neutrality. That's what I want to continue. We should agree. We should have the even playing field for everybody, and whoever's got the best idea, who's ever got the best new product, let them win. They shouldn't need the permission of AT&T and Comcast to get there.
Okay, let me ask you, where were you on the level 3 faux net neutrality claim?
Look, level 3 is not a classic net neutrality violation.
It's not a net neutrality violation at all.
I certainly think it's something that the FCC needs to look at, because we're in a situation where Comcast is the most powerful company, biggest broadband provider in the country.
If I can interrupt, most of our viewers have no idea what the question you just asked means or what your answer is. Level 3 is the company that is serving.
It's an internet backbone company. Right. So if you sort of imagine the internet coming to your house.
Serving Netflix now, and therefore there's a massive amount of traffic, and Comcast.
And they're trying to claim that
they're charging you for this.
And they're in a dispute with
heaven forfend that they charge for their services.
If they want to be transparent, if they want to explain, that they really have all this traffic, realistic and that they're offering no discrimination, like anybody with this much traffic pays the same way, then we don't have a problem. But they won't do that. They won't come clean about what's going on.
Why do they have to report their books to the government?
They have chosen to make an example or to single out a company that happens to be supporting one of their competitors. That worries me as an internet user. If they can then cut off my access to Netflix, which is one of the reasons I
if
give
they do that,
Comcast
get another internet service provider.
I wish I could. I wish I could. I maybe have one other choice, and that's Verizon.
That's one more choice than you have with government. If government's involved, they're
when I lived in Portland, I had one company that brought internet into my house.
And when was that?
And that was 6 months ago.
Right.
One company. Now, when I first moved to Portland, there were 4 or 5 that I could choose from.
You know what the impediment to that is?
And it was
government.
Comcast. No, it had nothing to do with government. It had to do with the fact that government... No, you're going to wait for me to finish this one. It had to do with the fact that we are not doing what France is doing. Comcast owned the cable wire that came into my floating home, and they said, that's it. And AT&T said, we're not going to run fiber down there. You're in a remote area, right? A quarter mile from downtown, and a remote area. And so I had one option. There was one piece of copper coming in the house. Now, in France, they would say, it doesn't matter. Whoever's got the copper is going to make a small profit, a predictable profit.
Thank God we have the Fifth Amendment that prevents that.
But anybody can be the internet service provider over that copper.
Yeah,
which is how it used to be.
That's called
the
takings clause.
It's how it was in the United States.
Common carrier regulation. It was
exactly.
our laws forever. And in the rest of the world, where they've got, in Japan, they're rolling out 100 megabits per second, they use common carrier.
They also have 1/1000th of landmass to build out on.
It's got nothing to do with it.
Then why don't we have more choices in urban areas?
So, you know,
because
it seems to me that what's going on here is that France is able to say, okay, you can have a choice of 100 different companies because they're playing common carrier rules with the pipes, with the cables. We're instead saying we're fine with oligopolies. We're fine with 5 or 6 companies ultimately controlling the entire internet, and instead of paying $33 a month like in France for internet service, paying $150.
I'd rather have 5 companies than one government. I'd rather have 5 companies to compete with than one government. I
consider that an insane statement.
I don't even understand how that's even part of the question.
Because by bringing the government into this process, which, by the way,
we are the government, Seton.
No, we're not. Because the massive...
What, you don't...
95 people signed a
democracy?
95 people signed a net neutrality pledge before the election. All 95 lost. This is not an issue for the American people. This is a leftist agenda checklist item that just got shoved down our throats by 3 unelected bureaucrats in the FCC.
About saying that the Drudge Report and lessgovernment.org should have the exact same priority over the internet that the New York Times
That's not what
and
this says.
Netflix does.
That's not what this says.
It absolutely is.
Absolutely what it says. And all these numbers, you know, we can say, oh, there's 27 Democrats who signed a letter for net neutrality, and they all got reelected.
I'll take 95 to 27. Let's do the 95 to 27. I'll take those numbers. That's a completely
bogus story. There were some long shot candidates, and yes, they happen to support net neutrality.
Oh,
I'm sorry,
for 95.
I'm sorry that they're not in office, but I've seen millions and millions of Americans, fortunately from across the political spectrum, who have weighed in for net neutrality.
Oh, no, wait a minute.
I don't think that
your organization's pledge signing was completely bogus, as written by Mike Wendy at MediaFreedom.org. That was you pulled every petition from the last 8 years on any subject and threw them all in on this petition.
2 million people supporting net neutrality. Unfortunately, what they wanted wasn't delivered by the FCC, but it's a far cry from whatever.
It was about 200,000 when you get down to it.
And I'm guessing that you would agree with this, that if you polled the American people broadly and said, would you like to be able to get any content from the internet at the same speed,
which they're doing
consistently?
Which they're doing now.
Right. Would you like the status quo to continue
involved
and have a rule in place that makes sure the status quo continues? The vast majority of Americans would say yes.
And if you followed up with the question, you get it now, correct? Yes. Do you want the government more or less involved going forward? Less.
Well, that's because of 30 years of Reaganomics and
what did the last election just tell you?
Hugely funded right-wing think tanks.
What did the last election just tell you?
The Koch brothers and
what did the last election just tell you?
Scaife has been throwing money
into. I'm sitting next door to the recipient of George Soros Open Institute money.
The last election told me that 15% of all the money spent was spent by invisible sources. Was spent by giant corporations and billionaires
engaging in their First Amendment rights.
Think tank. If you think
heaven forbid we keep going to the Constitution.
Yes. And this is a fundamental problem.
Yes.
Last words.
Look, last words. Don't listen to Seton. No,
nothing more close-minded than the open-minded liberal.
No, but make sure that Seton has the right to have his website work as well as any other website All we're asking for is an even playing field for everybody. If it takes very simple rules to do that, that's what the FCC should have been focused on. That's what they should be going around the country talking about, not being bullied by Seton and his corporate backers at AT&T or wherever the money's coming from, but actually just focusing on, let's keep the free and open internet, keep it free and open, make sure it stays that way. That's net neutrality.
Last question for you, Seton. When Comcast is bought out by George Soros and he decides that he's going to slow your website down to a 3-minute load,
I'll choose someone else.
What are you going to do?
I'll choose another ISP. Right. I will not go whining to the government.
All right, got it. Thank you very much, both of you. Don't expect Congress to make any changes to net neutrality in the short term, at least ones favorable to those who support the policy. Republicans who will control the House next year have adamantly opposed attempts to enact net neutrality. So corporations firmly in control of the internet, looks like we can kiss the greatest information resource in human history goodbye, at least as we know it today. My thoughts on this. And it goes, frankly, beyond just the concept, just the debate that we just had. And that is that there is this thing called the information commons. And the founders understood this. The people who started this country, they understood there was something important about news. In fact, the press, consider this for a moment. There, in the entire Constitution, there is only one business, one industry named. They didn't say the defense industry is the most important, so we must protect the defense industry. They didn't say the food industry is necessary for our lives, so we're going to protect the food industry. No, they named only one industry, news. The First Amendment, there shall be no constraints on free press. They understood the importance of an information commons, that you can't have a democracy without it. In fact, for the first year, the subsidies for the press go back to literally the 1780s. Back to the George Washington administration. The George Washington administration passed rules that allowed the post office to deliver newspapers at a discounted price and subsidize the manufacture of newsprint, so it was easier for people to go into the newspaper business, and they could even operate at a loss if they'd had to pay the regular price. We subsidized newsprint for almost 100 years in the United States. Since that, and then Ben Franklin came along and he said, people should have access. Actually, this was before we were a country. Ben Franklin was a young man. He was in his 20s, in the 1730s. He founded the Juno Society, and then he gave a bunch of books to a library to a town in Massachusetts and said, create the first public library. He created the Juno Society, also created a library in Philadelphia. Public libraries, the information commons. There are some who argue that the whole concept of public libraries originated in the United States, in this First Amendment country. Because our founders understood the importance of commons, of the information commons. Libraries, by the way, in most cases are subsidized by the government. Today's information commons is the internet. Kids today are not going into the public library looking to check out books, much to the chagrin of many librarians. They're going on the web. They're looking up stuff, on the web. And if it's not going to be subsidized, and up until the last couple of years it was. The whole internet started out as a DARPA thing, as a government-funded thing. If it's not going to be subsidized, at least it should be regulated for the public good.